Hey guys, thanks for tuning into the My Career Path podcast. Today is another book review for you guys, and today's book is Paycheck to Purpose by Ken Coleman. Ken Coleman's a person that I love listening to on podcasts regularly. He's on the Ramsey Show, just an awesome guy for careers, finding your dream job, and finding your purpose. So, hope you guys enjoy. All right, you guys, so here comes another book review, and you'll have to forgive the audio recording quality. It's probably a little bit lower than it usually is. I'm actually recording offset. So I just brought everything so I could record some episodes, so maybe for the next episode or two, it might be a little bit different than what you're used to, but we can work through this. So I got another book review for you guys to do. This is one that I read actually over vacation not too long ago, called Paycheck to Purpose. It's by Ken Coleman, and Ken Coleman is actually one person that I listen to quite frequently, just on the podcasting app. He's one of my favorite people to listen to about career advice, about what's kind of going on in the job market, different trends that we're seeing with some of the bigger companies. Like he talks a lot about Amazon and Google, the recent layoffs. I've really enjoyed his books. I've really enjoyed listening to his podcast. So I decided to pick up his book just to try to help me understand what I want out of a career and what I want out of a job. And I hope it helps you too. So the main premise of Ken Coleman's book, Paycheck to Purpose, is that everybody was put on the earth to fulfill a unique and individual purpose. And it's our job as human beings to find out what that is and how to fulfill that purpose. And he describes different ways that we can get clear on what our responsibility is and how we can work towards actually fulfilling that purpose. And as we kind of work to fulfill that purpose, Ken Coleman actually describes what he calls the sweet spot. And this is something that he talks about on his podcast a lot, and even on the Ramsey Show. They do a daily Ramsey Show for like 3 hours where they just take calls. And whenever he's on it, he usually mentions the sweet spot at least a couple times. So just finding that right job where you're really using everything you can to succeed and actually do work you love. And so that first key in actually determining what your sweet spot is actually figuring out what your talents are. We have to figure out what we're actually good at. Now, when I was reading over this section, I was trying to think of what I'm good at because nothing was really coming to mind. So to kind of better understand what my talents would be, I had to go to the people around me. And I think that's something that you can try too. Talk to the people that you're closest with. Whether that be your friends, whether that be your family, just find people who know you, who spend a lot of time with you and actually see what you're actually good at. Because if you can't think of anything on your own, the people around you will probably tell you. And so I would just recommend reaching out to close friends and family. They're probably the ones who have spent the most time around you, and they kind of help you get out of your own head. Because I know when I was trying to think of things that I'm actually good at, there was a couple of things that came to mind. And I think it's hard because every time I think of talents, you think of someone at a talent show. You think of someone who's capable of juggling 6 items that are on fire while reciting Shakespeare or something crazy like that. Whereas talents can just be, hey, I'm really good at math. I'm really good at visualizing data and making sure that everything's taken care of. I'm really good at making sure calendars are taken care of. And kind of translating talents into work, I found that to be a little bit more challenging. But the things that I listed that I think I'm good at are working on Excel spreadsheets, making it easy for other people to kind of understand different problems, and finding ways to kind of visualize and help them see what the issue is and what a solution might be. And so if you can't think of anything, talk with your friends and family to try to figure out what your talents are. And if it is juggling, awesome. If it's something a little bit more simple, like, hey, I'm really good at math. I'm really good at writing concise emails. Just figure out what that is and make a list of them. Ken Coleman recommends making a list of all 3 of these keys and then seeing which ones can kind of tie together in order to make your dream job, to find that sweet spot. So figuring out your talents can be really hard on our own, but when we actually look outside of ourselves and start to rely on the people around us, it becomes a lot more clear. So figure out what your talent is. That's the first key. The second key is passion. So what's the work you love to do? And Ken Coleman actually shares a quote from, and I'm probably going to butcher this name, Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. I'm not sure. I think it's Csikszentmihalyi is when I Googled it, what it came up as. But he was actually a psychologist that focused on flow. And flow is what happens when you get into something that you kind of lose all sense of time. Just think back on a previous experience where you were doing some activity or you were doing some kind of work and you just kind of lost all sense of time. You just kind of lost yourself in it. And then you kind of looked up and you're like, oh my goodness, like 3 hours have passed or 2 hours have passed or however long. Just find that thing that makes time fly. I remember watching the movie Soul with my wife not too long ago, and they actually kind of depict this. And if you've seen the movie, he's basically a jazz player who just absolutely loves music, loves jazz. And whenever he's playing the piano or playing an instrument and he kind of gets lost in it, he kind of like goes into this almost alternate dimension where he just loses everything. He loses himself and he's just completely in his music in that moment. Try to remember how that happens to you. What activities are you kind of involved in where you just kind of lose your track of time? I know for me, I really enjoy racquetball and playing it with my friends and family, and that's something that I totally lose myself on. Now, is that something that I can make a career out of? Well, maybe if I practice a lot more and lost some weight. And for me, like when I kind of lose track of time, even when doing these recordings or doing kind of the research for these episodes, I kind of lose track of time a little bit. Now, I have a very detailed schedule that I kind of go into, so I don't let myself just completely lose all sense of time because I have a schedule that I kind of go off of. But whenever I'm recording or even just doing research on a topic that I particularly enjoy, it becomes a lot easier for me to just kind of drift off and just feel like, hey, this is something that I really enjoy. This is something that I like doing. And that's kind of the key to finding your passion, is figuring out, hey, what can I put a good amount of time into that really makes me enjoy it, that I actually enjoy. So figuring out what your flow is. The last key that Ken Coleman talks about is called mission. And in order to find your mission, it's finding work or jobs that actually matter to you. It's what you want to create or accomplish. It's how are you going to use your talent and passions to actually make an impact on the world and the people around you. Who do you want to help? What problems do these people have? What connections do you have to these people? And this section really focuses on the people that can benefit from what you have to offer. No matter where you are on your career path, no matter how much experience or knowledge you have, how can people around you or how do the people you want to help actually benefit from what you already have? I would encourage everyone to kind of spend some time figuring out what your sweet spot is and really spend some time with the people that you trust to help you out with that. Because if you make that list, it's just kind of hard to get out of your own head. You might think you're really good at something and they might say, yeah, that's true, but you're also really good at this. And you kind of go, I never really thought of that. So kind of going into the next section of this kind of book review, I just want to share some of the quotes that I really enjoyed. And this is something that I love doing with kind of all the books that I read, is just figuring out what quotes kind of stand out to me and help me on my career and in my current job and even in finding a new job. So the first quote kind of ties back into what we've already been talking about. Here's Ken Coleman's quote: "In life, it is almost impossible to get the full picture when we self-assess." Which is funny because we spend all day with ourselves and yet we still can't see the whole picture. We have to rely on those we love and trust to actually help us find that sweet spot. And that's why I think it's so critical for us to actually talk about what we're thinking. There's something about putting your thoughts into reality and into words that just makes it that much more real. I'm always taking notes whenever I'm meeting with people I interview, whether that's for a job or for this podcast. I just want to make sure that the thoughts I'm having, that they're actually written down, because then they actually become real. There's so many thoughts that go through our head each day. It's important to think, don't get me wrong, but there's something about actually writing them down that kind of puts them into reality. And so talking with people helps you do that as well. You have to put your thoughts into words. You actually have to make sense. In your head, you don't have to make sense to yourself. But when you're talking to other people, you do have to make sense. So determining what your sweet spot by identifying your talents, passion, and figuring out how to actually help people and achieve your mission, I mean, that's how you find work that truly matters, and that's how you actually find your dream job. Another quote that I really love from Ken: "Your sweet spot includes multiple career paths and many jobs that you will love." And I just thought this was really important because I think growing up, I always thought, hey, I'm just going to find that job that I really love, that I really enjoy, and I'm going to work there forever. And it's going to be awesome always. And now that I've grown up, it's kind of changed, because the job that I'm currently at, it was a job that I really loved. Honestly, I thought I was going to work there forever. As I've gotten older and as I've kind of changed and started to develop new habits and new hobbies and new ideas, I realized that it's not my dream job. Well, at least not forever. There's other jobs that I want to kind of branch into. There's other opportunities for me that kind of are more in line with how I am right now. So just because you find your sweet spot doesn't mean that your career path stops, that that's the job you're going to work at forever. And as we change, so do our talents, so do our passions, and so do our mission. If you're doing work you love, but have kind of lost that spark, then maybe it's time to refocus and re-identify your talents, passions, and missions. Doing this exercise every couple of years or even every couple of months can help us keep that clarity. Another quote that I really enjoyed was, "Your time is the single greatest investment in your future." And this is something that I talked with Tim Cormier about in the most recent episode. You are who you hang out with. You are what you consume. You are what you spend time doing. And we've all heard those sayings, and that's because they're true. Where we choose to focus and where we choose to spend our time determines who we actually are in life. Whether we see that or not, and I know that for me, when I was finished with my bachelor's degree, I saw who I became after about 6 months of just working and then coming home. I felt hollow and purposeless. I didn't know what to do every day. I didn't feel like it was, and it goes back to that feeling that I've already expressed of I was just filling time. I just need to fill time so that time can just keep going by. Whereas now I get to choose where I put my time. I get to choose projects and work that I can really pour myself into to try to help other people. And when I was back just after I got my bachelor's degree, I just felt kind of dejected and insignificant. I didn't really want to do anything. Instead, I just was trying to find ways to, how can I kill another 2 hours? And if you're looking for ways to just kill another hour or two, and you're doing it constantly, like on a weekly basis, it's time for a change. And that's when the idea for the podcast hit me. I know I've shared this story a couple times, but it's something that's just stuck with me. I didn't want to do anything because I was just looking for ways to kill more time. And so this is just something that's always helped me. Just finding ways and people that I can help. And if that's just doing something small like drawing, writing, blog writing, even posting uplifting things on social media, or even starting a new business, find a way that you can actually use your time, because that's one of the greatest investments you can have. And time is a funny thing because it returns like a compound investment, just like our retirement accounts. Even if you just put in a little time every day, the returns are so much greater. And another thing to just kind of go along with how time is our single greatest investment in our future is to be so intentional about our focus. Ken Coleman kind of talks about how we have to be intentional in what we're doing. We have to be intentional on the path that we're choosing. And sometimes that means that we have to do something that we don't love in order to get to that point. There are times in our lives where we have to do things that we don't want to do so that later in life we can do what we actually want to do. And that's something that Dave Ramsey kind of shares as well in his, famous quote, "Live like no one else so later you can live like no one else." And I think what they mean by that is you have to do certain things now so that in the future you can do what you truly, truly love. And that might mean, hey, I have to work at this entry-level position for a little bit, but maybe 5 or 10 years down the road, it actually gets me to that position that I want to be in. And so things in life just often take a lot longer than we think. Kind of going back to that Bill Gates quote, we underestimate what we can do in a decade, but we overestimate what we can do in a year. And just finding ways, hey, it's the slow and steady that actually wins the race. It's the slow and steady and intentional who actually win the race. If you're just going aimlessly, then it might not work out. But if you have that directional focus of this is the end goal, here are certain steps that I can actually reach that goal, it just becomes so much more rewarding and you see so much more progression. I know that's something that I've really enjoyed in developing this podcast and developing the show, is setting benchmarks and goals for myself and actually seeing them kind of get ticked off every so often. When I started the podcast, I broke it down into quarters. And for the first quarter, I was like, I just want to interview 3 people. I just want to interview 3 people to get on the show. Like, that's a win. And I was like, whoa, like that felt awesome. I actually achieved what I set out to do. I was actually able to do that work. I was actually able to do more than I thought I could. And so this next quarter, I was like, all right, let's up the ante. Let's keep going. And so I have to work a little bit harder now, but it was so much more rewarding that I broke it down and said, hey, this is what I want to do. And then when the time came to kind of review and assess, I could kind of pat myself on the back. So just knowing that, your dream job might not be something that you just find on an application online. It might not be listed on Indeed. Hey, this is Colten's dream job. It might take talking with your supervisor or finding the work that you actually love and actually molding what that work is going to look like. Maybe it's taking from marketing. Maybe it's taking from data analysis. Or maybe it's just, hey, I want to work on my own schedule. I want to create. I want to develop. And just finding that balance of what you truly love to do, because as we figure that out, as we figure out what our unique purpose is in life, then we find others who it's their unique purpose, and everything just works so much better. I mean, hey, if I'm really good at growing potatoes and you're really good at growing oranges, I'll just focus on potatoes, you focus on oranges, and we can produce more than if we're both trying to produce potatoes and oranges. That kind of idea of comparative advantage. As you find work that you truly love, and as others do the same, we'll be able to do so much more. We'll be able to accomplish so much more as we do that together. Here's another quote that Ken Coleman shared in his book, "People matter more than your position." And this is something that as you're kind of in the job search, you're really looking for titles and things that kind of match what you want to do. And the fact of the matter is that people matter way more than your position. And that's something that you can kind of lose focus on as you are working towards a position, as you're working towards a goal. The people you meet along the way are incredibly important and benefit your lives more than you can probably realize, as long as you take the time to actually build those relationships. And that's something that I've really appreciated in getting to know more people and getting to know more people from different fields and seeing what their thoughts are, seeing how they view the world. I mean, even just talking with Tim Cormier and seeing how optimistic and positive he is. I mean, that is just so mind-blowing to me, because sometimes when you think about a job, and especially how it's depicted in movies and TV, where it's just like, yeah, it's a job. I clock in and then I go home. But he actually really loves the work he's doing. And that's something that Ken Coleman just talks about throughout his book, is finding that work that you're happy to go to, finding that work that actually means something, that actually matters to you. And because ultimately work is working with people to accomplish a greater purpose. So people matter more than the position. Take the time to actually get to know the people you're working with. Take the time to actually build those relationships that can benefit you down the road. Take the time to learn from those around you, regardless of where their status is, whether they work for you or you work for them. Take the time to actually learn and grow together as we kind of all go down our career paths. And this is something just to kind of go along with the last thought. He shared another one about just how people view networking. And this is something that I've talked about with a couple of different guests, just how people view networking as kind of gross and hard, and they don't want to do it. And Ken Coleman actually calls it, well, people think it's gross because it's transactional, because we kind of see it as, well, I have to do this in order to get this. Almost like you're using people to try to get to where you are, try to get to that spot. And kind of changing the mindset from, yeah, networking is gross if that's all you're doing, but if you're striving to actually build those strong relationships with people, then it's not gross. You're spending time actually getting to know another human being. You're spending time actually getting to know this person, what they like, what they dislike, what their family's like, what they actually value. And so overall, I actually really enjoyed reading this book. I really enjoyed hearing Ken Coleman's thoughts on how we can actually find work that we truly love, how we can break free from that mentality of, well, I have to go to work just to get a paycheck. Get away from the job and find work that is actually meaningful and that you love doing. And I think this book also gave me several ideas for future episodes, things that are prevalent, things that people are often thinking about when either trying to find a new career, trying to get out of a toxic workplace. It's just given me more ways to kind of think about the future and think about how I want to have an impact. So I hope you guys really enjoyed this book review. We're going to have more book reviews in the future. I've really enjoyed doing this, and kind of it gives me something to focus on while I'm reading. I've never been one to actually take notes when I'm reading. I usually just read for the heck of it. But finding ways to actually be like, hey, that was a really cool quote. I want to share that. And it's just helped me so much in my learning. So hope you guys enjoyed. If you do, make sure to follow me on social media. Make sure to leave a 5-star review. Please send me your feedback. Go to my website, mycareerpathpodcast.com, or just send me an email, colten, COLTEN, at mycareerpathpodcast.com. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts. I'd love to hear careers that you want to hear about, thoughts that you have on finding that purpose in life, especially in our work. So hope you guys enjoy. I'll catch you later.